So we are NanoLytx, and we are interested in treating multiple sclerosis by targeting its root cause. MS is a chronic and often crippling neurological disease. The blood-brain barrier vasculature is damaged, and then there's also damage to CNS myelin. The root cause remains elusive, and therefore there is no cure. We have identified gut bacterium Clostridium perfringens and its epsilon toxin as environmental triggers for MS. In 2013, we published our first paper showing that epsilon toxin, which is fluorescently labeled in red here, in these two panels, first binds to blood-brain barrier vasculature. You can see epsilon toxin staining the lumen of this magnified vessel. And then once it breaks down the blood-brain barrier, it can then bind to CNS myelin. So here myelin is stained in green, and epsilon toxin stains exactly the same structures as evidenced in the merged image. In this 2013 paper, we also identified the first case of an MS patient carrying the bacterium in their gut microbiota, which is notable as this bacterium is thought to be confined to the gut microbiota of dairy animals. And over the last 10 years, we've increased our assay sensitivity and can now identify the bacterium in greater than 60% of MS patients compared to just 13% of healthy individuals. And if you compare an MS patient who carries this bacterium to an asymptomatic healthy carrier, the MS patient carries approximately 1,600 times as much bacteria as that asymptomatic healthy carrier. The next step will be to detect epsilon toxin protein in MS sera, CSF, and brain to show that not only is the bacterium present in the gut, but the toxin has breached the gut epithelium and has made it into the bodily tissues and fluids of MS patients. We have multiple key opinion leaders supporting this hypothesis. Most notable would be Dr. Alfred Sandrock, who's the former head of R&D at Biogen IDEC. So to summarize the hypothesis, Clostridium perfringens colonizes the human GI tract, elaborates epsilon toxin, which is then absorbed into the circulation. It binds to the brain vasculature specifically, and then breaks down the blood-brain barrier, enters the brain, and then binds to and damages myelin. By breaking down the blood-brain barrier, it allows immune cells to infiltrate the brain and to exacerbate the tissue damage. To intervene, we have engineered camelid nanobodies to neutralize the toxin, both in the gut, but also in the circulation. Camelid nanobodies can be recombinantly engineered so as to fuse them to an IgG backbone to make an antibody-like molecule that can be applied to the circulation to neutralize the toxin and to prevent MS relapse. This engineering capability allows us to also fuse these nanobodies to affinity tags that will allow us to capture epsilon toxin from MS biospecimens for diagnostic and disease monitoring purposes. So we have identified 3 nanobody clones, 2 of which are neutralizing, and 1 of which is high affinity binding but non-neutralizing that will be used for diagnostics. But to show the neutralizing potential, we have developed an ex vivo assay by using very high concentrations of epsilon toxin. You can cause hemolysis in human red blood cells, as depicted here. This assay allows us to show that our lead candidate can neutralize ETX-mediated hemolysis completely at about a 5 molar ratio of nanobody to toxin. And the IC50 inhibitory concentration 50 is at about 2.32 molar ratio. The nanobody technology was really pioneered by a company called Ablinx, which was recently purchased by Sanofi. The patents for nanobody technologies have expired, but the first nanobody therapeutic was approved in 2019. Importantly, Lumen Bioscience has been using anti-clostridial toxin nanobodies to combat C. difficile colitis. And C. difficile is a clostridial species as related to C. perfringens. So here's our milestone development sequence. We've identified 3 candidate molecules. Our next steps will be to progress to animal studies showing efficacy in a mouse model. And then we want to optimize the route of administration and dosing and select a single lead candidate to go into pre-IND studies And we're asking for approximately $5 million to complete the sequence. There are currently no direct competitors targeting epsilon toxin or superfringins in the context of MS. The MS market is quite large, projected to be greater than $30 billion per annum by 2028. And currently, Biogen, Novartis, and Roche hold greater than 55% of the current market, but these companies are focused on blocking the inflammatory cascade, and we believe that we're upstream of the inflammatory cascade. We have intellectual property protecting our intervention globally in the world's biggest markets. And I just want to show our leadership team, Dr. Edmondo Campisi, who is a research associate at Rockefeller University, and myself, an instructor at Rockefeller University. And here's a summary slide of everything I just presented. Thank you.